Now, there is a nationwide shortage of medicines back home, and more worryingly, some of them fall under the crucial category. So these include medications for blood pressure, for example, epilepsy, hormonal pain relief, cancer treatments as well, a lot of things.
That's right, Tom. Now, Australia imports 90% of its medicines, and there are obstacles to domestic pharmaceutical companies stepping up to fill these gaps. Well, pharmaceutical supply chain researcher Peter Coomber says the medication shortage has worsened in recent years.
We've had shortages ongoing for many years now. They certainly have increased in frequency recently. Probably the key thing in all of this is that pharmaceutical supply chains around the world aren't what I would describe as resilient. There's often single points of failure, if you like. So some raw ingredients may come from one or just a few factories. And then likewise, also inactive components may have the same scenario, and then these need to go on to another factory. So basically, with all these dependencies in the supply chain, that can result in disruption quite easily. Then if you put on top of that Australia's geographical location, and also that we're a small market with effective pricing mechanisms to keep our prices low, that means that Australia is perhaps not the most attractive pharmaceutical market in the globe.
Interesting. So you mentioned that Australia has a small market. Is it feasible? Well, is it then economically feasible for Australian pharmaceutical companies to, step up and to manufacture medicines for the domestic market if it's that small?
Look, we do have some manufacturing in Australia. We manufacture some vaccines, also biosimilars, which are medications which work in the immune system. They're immune system modulators. We also have a small generic manufacturing industry. We have a reputation for very safe, high-quality medications. So the feasibility is there, but because we are a small market, there'd likely be a reliance on exporting, because we do lack the economies of scale, if you like, to be able to do that very, very profitably.
Right. Now, Australia, of course, has the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme as well. How much does that play into making Australia less attractive for medication manufacturers?
Look, it's certainly a fact, Fauzia. The Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme is very effective at providing affordable medications for Australians, but these part of the PBS is the pricing mechanism, and the pricing mechanism certainly does put downward pressure on the price due to price disclosures of all our wholesalers. So they disclose the price of their medications that they sell, but also the volume. And so that means that the overall price has downward pressure on it. This is reported twice a year. And so that means that the profit margins are probably less in Australia than they are in other markets around the world.
Now, Peter, we know that each state and territory manages their own medicines and in accordance to their own hospitals and their own medical centres as well. Is there any sharing going about around the states and territories? Let's just say if New South Wales, needs more cancer medications, can they tap on Victoria and say, listen, can we do a bit of a trade here? Does that happen?
Look, formally, I would say no, but there's certainly conversations. There's conversations at a national level with all very senior pharmaceutical and health logistics people from each state and territory, and they do discuss the current state of play with supply shortages and supply. So there is a little back scratching that goes on, but there's not formal mechanisms as such in place.
I wonder then if there's a need for a more, I don't know, something like a central unit to be able to monitor or coordinate these critical medications, because we're talking about very serious medication here, cancer treatment, we're talking about blood pressure treatments as well.
Absolutely. So the Therapeutics Goods Administration runs a medication shortage database, and we have mandatory supply shortage reporting in Australia. So the database is there to be accessed by health professionals, but it's open to the public as well. So the resource there regarding current and also anticipated shortages is online, but it's the next step, as you point out, that needs to happen. So perhaps a more federated approach there.
Okay, so then what can be done, in your opinion, to, fill the gap in terms of this interim or this intermittent shortage of medication?
Yeah, so medication shortages are continually changing. So I think without a robust and large pharmaceutical manufacturing industry in Australia, stockpiling is the next obvious solution to that. And I don't mean our consumers and patients running out and stockpiling, but rather a coordinated approach at each state and territory level, and even at the national level as well.
All right. Peter Coomber there, pharmaceutical supply chain researcher from Queenstown University. We thank you so much for sharing your time on this Sunday morning.
Thank you very much for having me.